Vladimir Putin isn't short of controversy, but his actions right now and the strings that he's pulling aren't something that is appreciated. The entire world has put sanctions on Russia, and these will hurt the country quite a lot. We don't expect the Kremlin to make any dumb moves, but with tension elevating between Ukraine and Russia, Putin says that they won't hold back until the invasion of Ukraine is complete. There is news received in the last few days that Putin could look to attack NATO. While he is taking such a strong measure is unknown, but most of it has to do with NATO's assistance of Ukraine. Anyone helping Ukraine in the war is seen as a potential enemy by Russia, and there's so much more that could happen, which will make the situation even worse. What is NATO's role in the Ukraine-Russian dispute, and how that damages Russia's relationship with them is something we will discuss today. Before going into all of that, we shall look at NATO's background and function. NATO and its role. NATO is a defensive alliance of 30 countries from Europe and North America, and it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This organization was created in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and other Western European nations to provide them security against the Soviet Union, modern-day Russia, the first military alliance that the United States enters into outside of the Western Hemisphere. Today, 30 countries are a part of NATO, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and others. A series of events from 1947 to 48 raised doubts among Western European nations as to what their authority was in that region. These nations became concerned about their physical and political security. Hence, they bought in the United States to be actively involved in European affairs and overlooked the situation that was so tense at the time. Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg signed the Brussels Treaty in March 1948, which stated that if any of the countries were attacked, the other two were required to assist it in war. After 2 months, then Senator Arthur Vandenberg proposed to the United States President Harry Truman to sign a security treaty with Europe. When this resolution was passed, negotiations began for the North Atlantic Treaty. European nations asked for assurances that the United States would intervene during the event of another member country being attacked. All other countries that are part of NATO will be required to defend and fight side by side with the country that is being attacked. After the events of the Cold War, it was decided that the Soviet Union could not be trusted, which is why these countries took this step. Russia and NATO. The current situation shows us that Russian President Vladimir Putin wouldn't strike directly at the alliance since it is too powerful to be handled by Russia alone. Article 5 is the most critical point in the entire treaty, which says that any attack on a NATO member country is considered an attack on all its members. It says, the parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against all of them. And consequently, they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them in the exercise of the right of individual or collective self-defense recognized by Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith, individually and in concert with the other parties, such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. Any such armed attack and all measures taken as a result thereof shall immediately be reported to the Security Council. Such measure shall be terminated when the Security Council has taken the measures necessary to restore and maintain international peace and security. The question that remains now is how much Putin is willing to respect this article's condition. The answer is sadly something which nobody knows. A man who has denied the existence of Ukraine and will do anything to put his country down cannot be trusted to do the right thing at any time. It is assumed that Putin was bluffing before this whole thing began, and sooner or later he would eventually accept Ukraine. The war between two countries, which was once seen as irrational, is something which Putin has chosen in his right mind. We expect Russia to do the same using the limited sovereignty draft treaties proposed in December. The goal is to set the European security system 3 decades back in the Soviet era and forbid the expansion of NATO. Unlike the Soviet Union, whose core priority was to preserve its post-World War II empire, Putin and Russia are on to recreate the empire that once was and bring forward the strategic limits to the heart of Europe. The Western countries have done exceptionally well to prevent Putin from achieving that goal. He shall now look to achieve it through other means because all countries will loyally withhold that treaty, especially Article 5 of the treaty. However, it would be foolish for the NATO countries to underestimate Putin. He says what he does, so he's probably looking for other ways to execute his plan. Are NATO and the other countries prepared? Speaking of preparation, here's where NATO's totemic belief in Article 5 comes in. Because of that belief, NATO's military measures remain inadequate for a serious challenge. Nuclear weapons in the deep background and limited rotational forces provide reassurance and perhaps some amount of deterrence, but NATO's conventional forces, even as they are being beefed up, are not tailored to defend against a force of the sort that is operating in and around Ukraine today. There's a perfect chance that Putin will go after resistance and determination of NATO after the invasion of Ukraine stops. However, it isn't known when the invasion will stop. The countries where he might kick things off are non-NATO countries, but countries close to NATO countries such as Sweden and Finland. If these countries want to save themselves from impending danger, they need to fast-track their membership to NATO. If they are on the safe side, they need to act fast and act now. The matters that will cost money and political energy, and since time is on the side of these countries, there isn't any need for delays. Romania, the militarily weak neighbor of Ukraine, will likely soon see Russian forces lined up along its border in a position to provide support for Siberia and the Republika Srpska. And if Russia refits its forces after the Ukrainian campaign, Putin will be observing the United States for political change after the midterm elections there. Gray zone operations could also be carried out against NATO countries that have become more vulnerable due to Ukraine's campaign. Moscow controls the Suwalki Gap, a 104-kilometer stretch of Poland and Lithuania borders that run between Russian-dominated Belarus and the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea. Once midterm elections are carried out in the United States, that is when Putin believes the United States will be at its most vulnerable. So we believe the limits of relying on Article 5 were understood during the events of the Cold War, where NATO maintained a solid defensive force to discourage Soviet leaders from giving in to temptation. However, it is essential to return to a full military view, and it needs to be done fast. The sanctions put in place for Russia will reduce Russia's ability to sustain war, and it is assumed that Putin will act fast to execute his countermeasures. If everything we've read above tells us one thing, Putin is decisive, stubborn, and once he makes up his mind, it is difficult to change it. Putin's draft treaties and his invasion of Ukraine relieved NATO of the non-binding commitments it agreed to in 1997. Permanent forces and bases now can and should be established on the territory of former Warsaw Pact countries. NATO's defense capabilities there should be ramped up by order of magnitude from 5,000 in 2021 to 50,000 stationed troops, from brigade level to an entire army corps equivalent. Vladimir Putin's nerve set him apart from other leaders of the world. If things are to continue as they are right now, then Ukraine will go entirely under the control of Russia. The president said, "It's not our plan to occupy the Ukrainian territory. We do not intend to impose anything on anyone by force." But it seems as if this plan has gone out the window. NATO countries will undoubtedly be involved sooner or later in this mess, and we hope Putin doesn't manage to have his say then. That's all for our video today. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to ensure you don't miss out on any of our videos.